Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. When Ethan Gray finally achieved success and recognition, the company made an exception, allowing him to bring one family member to the headquarters to take care of his daily life. But Ethan didn't think of bringing me, his fiancée. Instead, he chose to bring Sophia Lynn, his professor's daughter. He told me, if it weren't for my mentor and his wife's help, I wouldn't be where I am today. I owe them everything. I can't repay their kindness in any other way. So I want to take Sophia with me to show my gratitude. You understand me, right? Once my life settles down, I'll come back for you. In my previous life, I waited for Ethan for 30 long years until my face was wrinkled, and until his frail parents passed away one after another. But he never came back to get me. When I finally found where he worked, I discovered that he and Sophia had already had a son and a daughter together in this life. After hearing Ethan say those same words again, I simply nodded. I put the bank card I had been saving for years, money I'd planned to use to move to the capital with him, back into my pocket. Then I went and bought a train ticket heading south. The day Ethan left with Sophia, he couldn't find me, the free housemate who had taken care of his sickly parents all these years. He panicked like an ant on a hot pan, running around asking the neighbors where I'd gone. Someone told him that I had sold my breakfast shop a week earlier and bought a southbound train ticket. When Ethan heard that, he froze completely like he'd turned to stone. When word got out that I was selling the breakfast shop I had run for 8 years, people came in droves to look at it. My shop wasn't big, but because my cooking was good, I always had a lot of customers and steady business. The couple who finally signed the contract were middle-aged and straightforward. They signed quickly and left a deposit right away. After the shop was sold, I finally felt a sense of relief. I spent a week at home, still unable to believe I had been given another chance to live my life over again. As I was closing the shop for the last time and preparing to leave, I ran into some neighbors. They knew I had sold the shop, and they came over smiling warmly. "Lana, you've worked hard all these years," one of them said. "You finally made it. Once you go to the capital with Ethan and start living the good life, don't forget to come back and visit us. Don't forget your old neighbors." I smiled and nodded politely. None of them knew that the person Ethan was taking to the capital wasn't me. It was Sophia Lynn. And there was no need for me to tell them. I didn't want anyone laughing at my misfortune. I, Lana Reed, had dropped out of school at 18 and spent 8 years working from dawn until dusk, running a breakfast shop to support an ungrateful and shameless man. While the neighbors teased and congratulated me, I saw Ethan walking toward us with Sophia beside him. When he saw me talking to the neighbors, his expression darkened. Ethan always saw himself as an intellectual, someone superior to ordinary people, and he had always looked down on our simple, hard-working neighbors. He used to tell me to stay away from them, saying they were petty and self-serving. In my previous life, I never understood why he despised such kind and honest people so much. Now I finally did. It wasn't just the neighbors he looked down on. He looked down on me too. In Ethan's eyes, I was no longer worthy to stand by his side. The only person who could was Sophia Lynn. Sophia was the daughter of Ethan's college professor. She was well-educated, graceful, could paint and play the piano, and always had endless things to talk about with him. As for me, Lana Reed, I knew nothing beyond oil, salt, sauce, and vinegar. My only education was a high school diploma. To Ethan, that made me beneath him. He had forgotten that once upon a time I had been his equal. In high school, my grades were just as good as his. The only reason I ended up running a breakfast shop was so I could pay for his tuition and take care of his frail parents. From the age of 18 to 26, I gave 8 years of my youth to Ethan and his family. I made him the center of my world, my only priority, and supported him without hesitation. When Ethan graduated from college, I thought our hardships were finally over, that we could finally breathe. But less than a year into his job, he came home in disgrace. He told me that someone had been jealous of his professor's success and had framed both the professor and him. His mentor and the professor's wife were sentenced to prison, and Ethan narrowly escaped punishment but was expelled and lost his job. He came home sighing and brooding for days, lying in bed doing nothing. And it was me, always me, who stayed by his side, comforting him and helping him through it all. To help Ethan Gray get back on his feet, I secretly pulled some strings and managed to borrow $500,000 from the bank. I used that money to set up a small laboratory for him so he could focus on his research without distractions. Meanwhile, I kept getting up before dawn and working late into the night, running my breakfast shop to support Ethan and his frail, chronically ill parents. Ethan shut himself off from the outside world and poured everything into his experiments. After 3 years of hard work, he finally achieved the results he had been hoping for. It was around that time that he claimed to have found the daughter of his old professor, the one who had been imprisoned years ago. Sophia Lynn showed up uninvited, which took Ethan by surprise. Because of her father's connection to him, he treated her with great care and attention. He accompanied Sophia on walks and hikes, comforting and supporting her, just as I had once comforted him when he was down and hopeless. When I questioned him about it, Ethan told me self-righteously that he owed a debt of gratitude to Sophia's parents, and that he was simply repaying that kindness. In my previous life, I had been foolish enough to believe him without suspicion. But in truth, all the tuition and living expenses from his school days had been paid with the money I earned selling breakfast every morning. I had no idea what so-called kindness that professor had ever shown him. Still, I believed every word he said. Not only did I allow him to take care of Sophia, but I even lowered myself to help her too. Sophia was a pampered young woman from the big city who couldn't get used to the food in our small county town. So, I learned to cook and make soups that suited her tastes. She couldn't stand the old worn-out house we lived in. So, I spent my own money to rent her a more comfortable apartment. I busied myself every day taking care of Sophia as if I were her maid, never once stopping to think about the relationship between her and Ethan. I didn't know that while I was covered in grease and sweat, working myself to exhaustion, the two of them were secretly sharing love and whispers under the moonlight. After Ethan left for the capital with Sophia, I stayed behind in our small county, continuing to sell breakfast and care for his sickly parents without complaint. Ethan only came back once a year, spending a few days at most. He would leave me with a few empty words of gratitude and promises before rushing off again. In my previous life, I had worked myself to death for Ethan. When I finally went to the capital to find him, I learned the truth. He and Sophia were already married and had a son and a daughter. They lived in a luxurious home and drove fancy cars. Ethan refused to even meet me. Instead, he sent Sophia to deal with me. Sophia threw a bank card at me with a cold smile. "There's $300,000 in there," she said arrogantly. "Consider it payment for the 30 years you spent taking care of Ethan's parents." I demanded to see Ethan to talk things through, but Sophia refused and ordered the guards to beat me. I was kicked and punched until I could barely move. Humiliated and broken, I stumbled into the street, and that was where I died, crushed under the wheels of a passing car. Maybe heaven took pity on me because I was given another chance. I was reborn back to the week before Ethan planned to abandon me, and his sick parents to take Sophia to the capital. Everything could still be changed. "Ethan Gray, this time you're going to repay every debt you owe me with interest." When Ethan walked toward me with Sophia that day, the neighbors who had gathered around scattered like startled birds. They never liked Ethan, just as he never liked them. Ethan frowned as he approached and said impatiently, "Haven't I told you before? You shouldn't be spending time with these people. They're small-minded and unrefined. You need to be careful not to let them influence you." I didn't answer. My eyes lingered on his face, handsome as ever with sharp features and a tall, athletic build. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches, he was every bit the picture of a charming man. In my previous life, that face had been the reason I gave everything for him. I had been so blinded by his looks that I never realized his heart was rotten to the core. Ethan didn't notice the coldness in my eyes. He went on, "Didn't I already tell you? You're not coming with me to the capital. Why didn't you explain that to them? I've told you so many times. It's not that I don't want to bring you. It's just that Sophia has more potential than you. You only know how to make breakfast, but she's educated and capable. Given this opportunity, she's bound to shine." Hearing him say something so shameless with such self-righteousness made me sick to my stomach. I stared at him and said evenly, "I don't need to go to the capital with you. After all, there's nothing between us now. But are you sure you want to leave your parents behind? They're both ill. Can you really rest easy knowing that?" Ethan's face stiffened for a moment before he softened his tone. "Aren't my parents being taken care of by you? We're engaged, Lana. It's only natural for you to look after them. Who else would do it if not you? How could Ethan Gray say something like that? Asking an outsider like me to fulfill his duty as a son. The audacity of it made my blood boil. When he saw me staring straight at him, Ethan seemed to realize his words had been inappropriate. His tone softened. Lena, please try to understand me this time. Okay? It's not that I don't want to take you with me. Your shop keeps you so busy. If you came with me, what would happen to it? Taking care of my parents is just something you do along the way, isn't it? Along the way, he spoke of caring for his sick, fragile parents as if it were a trivial chore, something light and effortless, as though he were talking about playing a game. My anger flared instantly. Ethan, do you even realize how exhausting it is to take care of your parents? I demanded. Do you know how much money it costs every month just to keep them alive? Of course, Ethan didn't know. He didn't earn a cent. He spent all his time shut in that lab, always needing money for his experiments. He had no idea that his parents' medical bills cost thousands every month, or how much effort I had to put in waking up before dawn, working until midnight to earn every dollar. I had never once complained to him about my exhaustion. I didn't want to distract him or bruise his fragile pride. But all my silence had done was feed his arrogance, his belief that he was above the rest of us, that the world owed him service just because he was different. Seeing me question him so directly, Ethan's face darkened. They say talking about money ruins relationships, and I guess it hit his pride. He snapped, accusing me of being money-minded, then stormed off with Sophia Lynn trailing behind him. I watched them leave, then went straight to the train station to buy a ticket. My shop had already been sold. The final payments settled. It was time for me to leave this place for good. But on my way back from the station, fate decided to mock me. I ran right into Ethan and Sophia again. They were carrying several shopping bags, arms full of boxes. Safia noticed me first and called out cheerfully, smiling as if nothing in the world could taint her innocence. Lana, what a surprise. You're out shopping. Shouldn't you be home taking care of Mr. and Mrs. Gray and prepping food for tomorrow's breakfast? I glanced at the bags in her hands and she immediately explained, Ethan said my clothes are too old and that I'd embarrass him in the capital, so he insisted on buying me new ones. They're all brand names and he even got me jewelry. He spent over $10,000. I looked at Safia's stylish new outfit, then down at my own faded, overwashed clothes. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. That's nice. Ethan's really thoughtful toward you. Ethan, who had been quiet until then, noticed my shabby appearance. He pressed his lips together and handed me a small shopping bag. This is for you, he said. Sophia leaned closer, smiling sweetly. It's a pretty scarf, Lana. Pink. Ethan said you like pink, so he picked it out especially for you. One look at the packaging told me it was cheap. Probably some promotional freebie he'd gotten when buying all of Sophia's expensive things. I didn't take it. My voice was calm but cold. Pink's my least favorite color. I won't be needing it. Miss Lynn, why don't you keep it for yourself? I turned and started walking away. Behind me, Sophia's voice trembled, full of fake concern. Ethan, is Lana mad at me? It's all my fault. I shouldn't have let you buy those things. Now she's upset. Should we return them? I ignored them completely, not bothering to look back. Ethan's voice grew sharp with irritation. Return them? Why would we do that? I bought them for you. It's not like I used Lana Reed's money. What right does she have to be angry? Forget her. You're hungry, right? Didn't you say you liked Cantonese food? There's a famous restaurant nearby. I'll take you there for lunch. I quickened my pace, leaving their voices behind me. Ethan had taken Sophia to eat the food she liked. Yet, in all these years, he had never once taken me out for a meal. He probably didn't even know what I liked to eat. My stomach grumbled. Up ahead, I spotted a hot pot restaurant. I walked in, took a seat, and ordered a meal. The rich, spicy aroma filled the air, numbing my tongue and waking my senses. As I ate, tears streamed down my face. The taste of chili and broth felt like the taste of freedom. How long had it been since I'd enjoyed something this flavorful? After so many years serving the Gray family, I had almost forgotten what happiness or spice tasted like. Because Ethan's two sickly parents had been on medication for years and couldn't eat anything spicy or flavorful, Ethan never touched spicy food either. That's why all the dishes I made were always mild and bland. But from that moment on, I decided I would never lift another finger for the Gray family. Never again. After enjoying that delicious hot pot meal, I went to the mall and bought myself a few new outfits. When I saw that it was getting late, I headed home. But as soon as I reached the door, I heard shouting coming from inside. The furious voice of Ethan Gray. "What? You didn't even have lunch? That damn woman Lana. She didn't come back to cook for you." His sickly parents were clearly complaining about me, talking behind my back and badmouthing me. His father grumbled. "Lana only acts kind in front of you. Once you're gone, she completely ignores us. I'm worried that after you and Sophia leave, she'll mistreat us." His mother was crying. "Take us with you, Ethan. How many more years do we even have left? You've made something of yourself now, and we'd like to see the big city and enjoy a little life too. Shameless old parasites." So that's what my kindness over all these years had bought me. Nothing but ingratitude. Now I finally understood why Ethan had turned out to be such a despicable man. Rotten seeds grow rotten fruit. His parents were no better than he was. Of course, Ethan had no intention of taking those two burdens with him. He immediately refused. "I can't take you right now. Things aren't settled yet over there. And besides, you're both in poor health. You need someone to look after you. We'll talk about it later." His mother realized her crying was useless and stopped, sniffling in silence. I walked slowly into the house carrying my shopping bags. The moment Ethan saw me, his face darkened. "Oh, so you do remember to come home?" he snapped. I shot back coldly. "Why do I need your permission to walk into my own house?" Ethan had never seen me this sharp before. He was momentarily stunned, then scolded me. "Why didn't you cook lunch for my parents? Don't you know they haven't eaten anything yet?" I raised an eyebrow in disbelief. "Didn't you take Miss Lynn out for Cantonese food this afternoon? I figured you'd bring something back for your parents." "What? You two just ate by yourselves and didn't even think of them? They're your own parents, Ethan." At that, his mother's head snapped up. "Cantonese food?" she repeated, confused. I told the story without hesitation. I ran into Ethan and Miss Lynn at noon. He bought her clothes and jewelry worth over $10,000, then said he was taking her to eat Cantonese cuisine. I heard that restaurant is pretty fancy. Just one dish costs a few hundred. I thought Ethan was being so generous and filial that he'd bring something back for you, didn't he? Ethan's parents' faces twisted in shock and disgust. They stared at me like they just swallowed something bitter. They couldn't believe their son had spent that kind of money on another woman and completely ignored them. Clothes and jewelry worth tens of thousands and luxury dishes that cost hundreds each, things they'd never even dared to dream about. Tears welled up again as his mother wailed. "We raised you with such hardship and this is how you repay us? You ungrateful child. They say a man forgets his mother once he has a wife. But look at you. You're not even married yet, and you're already turning your back on us." I stood there watching their crying and shouting, feeling nothing. Without saying a word, I walked past them and went straight into my room. The noise continued outside for a long time before Ethan finally managed to calm his parents down somehow. A moment later, there was a knock on my door. "Lana," he said. "We need to talk." I opened the door slowly. "Sure. What do you want to say?" Ethan was clearly trying to control his temper. "I know you're upset about me not taking you to the capital," he said. "But I've already explained. It's not that I don't want to. Once things settle down, I'll come back for you." He actually thought I was angry because I couldn't go with him. The irony almost made me laugh. I said nothing, just stared at him coldly. Ethan's eyes flickered with guilt and he lowered his voice. "My parents' health isn't good. You've worked hard taking care of them and I appreciate that. Here's what I'll do. The company gave me a $1 million bonus. I'll give you $10,000 first. From now on, you can keep looking after my parents. I'll send you money every month." Ethan said. "Send money, huh?" I almost laughed. He made it sound so nice, but in my past life I never received a single cent from him. On the contrary, after he left for his new job, I ended up sending him money instead. Sophia Lynn always had to have the best of everything. Food, clothes, jewelry, you name it. When Ethan took her with him that time, I was worried he wouldn't have enough to get by. So, I gave him the $100,000 I'd spent years saving. And even with that, he still ran out. He would write letters or call every few weeks complaining about how hard life was, how his salary barely covered anything. I pitied him, fool that I was, and sent him every penny I could spare. I even went around borrowing money from neighbors just to help him get through hard times. By the end of it, I had sent Ethan nearly $400,000 of my own hard-earned money. But this time I had come back a week earlier than before, and I wasn't going to be that fool again. This time, whatever he'd taken from me, he would pay it all back with interest. I sighed. $10,000, Ethan? What do you think that's going to do? I looked him straight in the eye. Since we're talking about money, let's be honest with each other. It's not just your parents' medical bills that need paying. There's also the loan I took out for your lab. Back then, when I helped Ethan build his laboratory, I didn't have much saved. I borrowed $500,000 from the bank, a 3-year loan due to be repaid all at once, plus the fees and interest, and it's due now. In my last life, I hadn't told Ethan about it. I quietly paid it off myself with years of hard work. But in this life, just when I was preparing to go to the bank, I was reborn. So no, I wasn't going to be stupid enough to repay that loan for him again. He said his company had rewarded him with $1 million. Perfect. He could use that to pay it off himself. $500,000 plus interest over 3 years. By the time he covered that, and after spending over $100,000 on Sophia, there wouldn't be much left of his so-called bonus. Without that money and without me supporting him like before, I wondered how he and his sweetheart were going to survive in the capital. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Not only would I stop giving Ethan money, but I also wouldn't tell him that I'd already sold the breakfast shop. And I definitely wouldn't tell him that I had no intention of taking care of his sickly parents any longer. After all, everyone should look after their own parents, shouldn't they? When Ethan realized he still owed the lab loan, his expression turned sour. I thought you already paid that off. How could I? I said evenly, emphasizing every word. My breakfast shop is tiny. How much do you think I make? And your lab kept eating up money nonstop. On top of that, your parents' monthly medical and medicine expenses cost $8,000 or $9,000. Oh, and let's not forget Miss Lynn's expenses. She eats well, dresses well, lives well. The rent for her apartment is overdue, by the way. You should probably pay that too. Honestly, I've been running a deficit for years. You knew that, didn't you? Ethan's face flushed bright red. I sighed and said softly. Before, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to distract you from your experiments. But now that you've made it, since you can afford to buy Miss Lynn clothes and jewelry worth over $100,000, covering a small debt like this should be no problem, right? Oh, and Ethan, once you pay off the bank, don't forget to repay the money I borrowed from our neighbors. Ethan couldn't exactly refuse. For all his arrogance, he still cared about his reputation. At least for now, he couldn't afford to look like a scumbag. So, reluctantly, he handed over the rest of the money his company had given him. The next day, I took the remaining balance and went straight to the bank to settle the loan. When I returned home, I heard arguing in the yard. It was Sophia and Ethan. He really used the rest of the money to pay off debts. Sophia's voice was shrill and angry. Didn't you say she ran a breakfast shop? I heard it was popular, always full of customers. How could she not have any money? Ethan sounded irritated. The debt is real, and I've poured plenty into her business over the years. Besides, you spend money like water. Sophia's tone immediately softened, pitiful and trembling. It's my fault, isn't it? If I'd known this would happen, I never would have let you buy me those expensive clothes and jewelry. What should we do now? Should I return them? Ethan hesitated, torn between his pride and his affection for her. Forget it. You've already bought them. Keep them. But what about money? Sophia pressed. We're leaving for the capital soon. Without money, how are we supposed to live? Ethan didn't answer. He paced back and forth across the yard, frowning. He didn't know what to do because in the past he never had to think about it. Money had always come easily to him because I had always quietly handed it over, reading his moods, anticipating his needs before he even opened his mouth. After a moment of silence, Sophia spoke again, her voice filled with false concern. Ethan, do you think Lana did this on purpose? Maybe she's trying to get back at us because she can't go with you. They thought I was using money to manipulate him into giving up. What a joke. Ethan actually defended me for once, saying softly, Lana isn't that kind of person. She's kind and simple. She doesn't have that kind of scheming mind. Sophia sighed, her voice full of worry. I'm just afraid we won't be able to live once we get to the capital. Without money we won't last a day. Ethan let out a weary sigh. You're right. Then Sophia spoke again, hesitating as if testing the waters. Ethan, what if you asked Lana to take out another loan? Ethan blinked. A loan? Yes, Sophia said eagerly, her tone brightening as she pushed the idea further. A loan? Didn't she already borrow $500,000 before to build your lab? She must still have those connections. Why not ask her to help you get another loan? Say $5 million this time. $5 million? Ethan frowned. That's a lot. I doubt the bank would agree. Sophia waved her hand dismissively. A lot? That's not even enough to buy a decent apartment in the capital. Lana adores you. If she uses her breakfast shop as collateral, she could definitely secure that kind of loan. Just talk to her, Ethan. She'll help you if you ask. Ethan thought it over, then finally nodded. All right, I'll talk to her. Despicable. My hands clenched into fists when I overheard their plan. Even after everything, they still wanted to use me. They really had no shame. Fine, I thought. Let's see how long your little game lasts. From that day on, when Ethan came looking for me, I always told him I was too busy at the shop. I stopped going home entirely. I couldn't stand to see the disgusting faces of the three Grays, and I refused to waste another ounce of effort on them. But to my surprise, Ethan showed up at my breakfast shop himself a few days later. He walked in with a big smile and a thermos in his hand. Lana, he said cheerfully, I made some chicken soup for you. Before I could even respond, he unscrewed the lid and poured some into a bowl for me. I noticed his fingers were wrapped in a small bandage. He must have cut himself while cooking. In the past, I would have felt sorry for him, asked if he was all right, maybe even fussed over it, but this time I pretended not to notice. Just leave it there, I said flatly. I'm busy. We'll talk later. Ethan looked a little deflated but forced a smile. After standing there awkwardly for a moment, he tried again. It's my first time butchering a chicken, he said, holding up his bandaged finger like it was proof of effort. I finally realized how hard you work every day. You do so much. I never understood before. He reached out suddenly and took my hand, his voice full of false sincerity. Lana, thank you for taking care of me all these years. I promise I'll treat you well from now on. In my past life, hearing those words would have sent me over the moon. I would have believed him no matter how empty the promise and worked myself to death for his sake again. But this time, after dying once, I knew better. I knew exactly what he was doing, trying to soften me up so I'd agree to help him get that loan. The very thought made me sick. I pulled my hand away. I've got things to do, I said coolly. If there's nothing else, you should go. But Ethan refused to leave. He insisted on staying to help out. The irony was the shop had already been sold. There was nothing to do. But since he wanted to play this act of diligence, I decided to let him. Fine, I said, crossing my arms. You can mop the floor and wipe down the tables. For the next 2 or 3 hours, I watched in silence as Ethan scrubbed and cleaned, his back aching, his breath short. He was sweating and panting by the end, clearly unused to physical labor. That was when Sophia showed up. The moment she saw him, her face twisted in outrage and distress. How can you let Ethan do this kind of work? She yelled. Do you have any idea? His hands aren't made for cleaning. They're meant for scientific research. I didn't answer. I just smiled faintly watching the two of them. Ethan stubbornly continued wiping the tables and even went into the kitchen to clean, ignoring Sophia's attempts to stop him. I never realized how much Lana does every day, he said quietly. She's been working herself to the bone for us all these years, and I've never helped her once. I feel ashamed. He kept cleaning and I didn't stop him. Sophia, after trying to help for less than half an hour, started crying. I twisted my ankle, she wailed, clutching Ethan's arm dramatically. Ethan immediately dropped everything to tend to her, insisting on taking her to see a doctor. As he helped her out the door, the woman from the barbecue shop next door walked in. She glanced around at the spotless tables and polished floors and let out an admiring sigh. Lana, you're really something, she said. You've already sold the shop, But you still cleaned everything so nicely for the next owner. Ethan froze in place when he heard that, the smile on his face vanishing completely. When Ethan heard the woman's words, he froze for a moment, confusion flashing across his face. He turned to the barbecue shop owner. Sold the shop? What do you mean by that? The woman, known for being blunt, answered without hesitation. You didn't know? How could you not know? Lana's worked hard for so many years, and now her hardship has finally paid off. She's heading to the capital with you to enjoy life, right? Naturally, she won't keep running that exhausting breakfast shop. She deserves something easier. That's why she sold it. She went on enthusiastically. Because Lana is such a good businesswoman and her food is well loved, the new owners were eager to take over. They even paid a $50,000 transfer fee up front. The mention of $50,000 made Ethan and Sophia's eyes light up instantly. I quickly cut the woman off before she could say more. You should get Miss Lynn to the doctor right away. Her injury can't wait. Ethan nodded stiffly, helping Safia away. When they reached a quiet street with no one around, Safia spoke first, her voice small and trembling with feigned innocence. Ethan, why would Lana sell the shop without telling you? Ethan looked conflicted, his brows furrowed. She must have done it for me, he said finally. She knows I don't have money right now, and is worried about how we'll manage in the capital. Safia didn't seem convinced. Her voice turned cautious, but she didn't say a word about it to you. Isn't that strange? She paused as if testing the waters. If she sold the shop, then how will she and your parents get by? She'll be fine, Ethan said irritably. I'll take care of my parents from now on. But Lana's still so young, Sophia said sweetly, pretending to sound thoughtful. She can't just stop working altogether. Maybe she shouldn't have sold the shop. If she wants to help you, she could just use it as collateral for another loan. That way the business keeps running and you'll still have money to use. Wouldn't that be better? Ethan let out a long sigh. Lana's worked hard for years. I only just realized how much she's sacrificed. His voice grew soft, guilt creeping in. Today, when I cleaned the shop myself, I finally understood how hard she's had it. Just mopping the floor and wiping the tables exhausted me, and she's been doing that day after day for 8 years, plus running the kitchen, buying ingredients, and managing everything alone. She's never once complained. His eyes misted slightly. That breakfast shop is her life, her whole world. She dropped out of school to start it just to pay for my education and take care of my sick parents. Through wind and rain, she kept it running for 8 years. And now, after everything, she sold it clearly because of me. She must have done it because she was worried I wouldn't have money for our future. In his mind, my devotion was pure and selfless, shining like the sun. But what had he ever given me in return? He hadn't even bought me a cheap dress, nor taken me out for a single meal. That night, Ethan made a silent vow to himself. He would treat me better from now on. I had no idea what Ethan and Sophia talked about, nor that he'd made any such promise in his heart. I hadn't planned on telling him about selling the breakfast shop anyway, but since the barbecue shop owner had already spilled the secret, there was no reason to hide it any longer. I expected Ethan to confront me, maybe ask why I'd sold the shop, but to my surprise, he didn't ask a single question. When I got home that evening, he had already cooked dinner. He even brought up something I hadn't heard him mention in years: my parents' Memorial Day. My parents had been gone for 10 years, and every year, rain or shine, I went to visit their graves. In the early years, Ethan had accompanied me once or twice, but later he never mentioned it again. That night at dinner he suddenly said, "Lana, tomorrow's your parents' death anniversary. Let me come with you to visit their graves." I was caught off guard. There was even guilt in his expression. "I've already prepared the incense, candles, and offerings," he added softly. His sudden change of attitude startled me. In my previous life he'd never done this. So what's this now? A guilty conscience? I declined calmly. "No need. You have your own things to do. I'll go by myself." The next morning when I woke up, Ethan had already made breakfast. He called me to the table, but his parents sat there with dark, sour expressions. Their eyes were cold, their mouths tight with disapproval. The moment I reached for the food, his mother muttered under her breath, "Breakfast made by a woman. Figures." His mother muttered something under her breath about a man cooking breakfast as if it were some kind of disgrace. I let out a cold laugh. That breakfast he made was for himself, for you, for Miss Lynn. What does any of that have to do with me? Leaving those words behind, I picked up the offerings I'd prepared for my parents' graves and headed out the door. Ethan quickly grabbed the incense and offerings he had prepared and ran after me. Lana, wait. I'll go with you. Don't mind what my mom said. She's uneducated. Her thinking is old-fashioned. Old-fashioned? Sure, I said flatly. But it only applies to me, doesn't it? I don't see her saying a word when you cook for Miss Lynn. He froze, then stammered. I'm sorry, Lana. I really am. I'll make it up to you. I'll treat you better from now on. I promise. Ethan seemed like a different man that day, pouring out apology after apology, sweet words flowing from his mouth like honey. He said he wanted to marry me legally, that once things settled down, he'd throw me a proper wedding. But I felt nothing. I wasn't moved at all. I just waited for him to bring up money, the one thing that truly mattered between us now. Yet he never did. Instead, he rambled on about how he'd hand over his salary once he started working, how he'd buy a house in the capital, and how he'd bring me and his parents there to live a good life together. He talked the entire way, his voice soft and steady, almost convincing. For a brief moment, my heart softened a little. I thought about telling him the truth, that I wasn't planning to marry him, that I was going south, and that he needed to make arrangements for his parents himself. But before we even reached my parents' graves, Ethan's mother came running toward us, panting heavily. Ethan, Sophia's stomach hurts. She's in so much pain. She's rolling on the floor. You need to come back right now. Ethan hesitated, guilt flashing across his face. Lana, Sophia doesn't have anyone else to rely on right now except me. I stared at him, expressionless. Then go take care of her. Relieved, Ethan nodded quickly. I'll come with you next time to visit your parents' graves, he said, handing me the incense and offerings before rushing off. His parents didn't leave immediately. Instead, they stood there glaring at me, their eyes full of disdain. Lana, his mother said coldly, you've been getting a little too full of yourself lately. You think you're something special now. What's that supposed to mean? I asked quietly. She let out a sharp, mocking laugh. My son Ethan is destined for greatness. Safia told me herself. He's going to be earning millions a year, so you better watch yourself. Don't think you can order him around anymore, or I'll make sure you regret it. I gave a bitter smile. Oh, the one you mean throwing herself at Ethan. That's Miss Lynn, isn't it? So what if it is? She sneered. You think you can compare to her? She's beautiful, educated, and comes from a good family. If it weren't for Ethan's soft heart and loyalty, you'd have been out of here long ago. And just so you know, Sophia has been very considerate toward us. I've seen her myself hugging Ethan, being so sweet to him. As she spoke, her face shone with smug satisfaction. The disgust that rose in my chest made me feel physically ill. How could an entire family be so shameless, so vile? Before walking away, Ethan's mother threw one last warning over her shoulder. You better reflect on your attitude, Lana. Things aren't like they used to be. They turned and left, their heads held high. I looked down at the incense and offerings Ethan had handed me, then threw them straight into a trash bin. I took only my own things and continued on to my parents' graves alone. I knew I was leaving soon, maybe for good. I probably wouldn't get the chance to come back every year to pay my respects. So, I stayed a little longer, just sitting there in silence, keeping them company. After offering prayers and burning incense, I lingered for another 2 hours before heading back. On the way home, I made a decision. Since the Gray family was so shameless and cruel, I didn't need to show them any kindness. I wouldn't tell Ethan about my plans to leave, and I certainly wouldn't help him make arrangements for his parents. In fact, I'd go one step further. I'd sell my house. His parents were so proud, always boasting about how capable their son was. Well, then surely someone like that could provide them a fine place to live. They didn't deserve to keep staying in my home. That night, I listed my house online at a very low price. Within days, people started showing up to see it. I had only one condition. Whoever wanted it could have it cheap, as long as they paid quickly. The house sale went through in full, and the property transfer was completed. I planned to let the buyers take possession after I left town. During those few days, the Gray family was out from morning until late at night, so we barely crossed paths. Sophia Lynn was said to be suffering from stomach pain, something about eating bad food and getting gastritis. The entire family hovered around her, fussing over her every need. Their hearts and attention were all wrapped around Sophia, so none of them had any idea I'd sold the house. Once in a while I would bump into Sophia. She always found subtle, almost artistic ways to provoke me, her words dripping with false innocence but sharp enough to cut. Ethan's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Gray, would sometimes corner me too, offering little warnings or condescending advice. I ignored them all. Eventually, a buyer finalized the purchase. I accompanied them to the real estate office to complete the paperwork. The whole process took until nearly 7 that evening. When I returned home, it was rare to see the entire Gray family together for dinner. Ethan was even wearing an apron, busy cooking in the kitchen. When he saw me walk in, his parents' faces immediately soured. His mother scowled. "Where have you been all day? You ignore everything we tell you. You're getting more and more outrageous." Ethan stopped her quickly, trying to smooth things over with that gentle tone of his. "Dinner's ready," he said, placing the dishes on the table. "I made this myself. Try it." "I've already eaten," I said simply. "You all go ahead." Without looking at Ethan's disappointed face, I went straight to my room to pack. My train left at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I needed to be ready. As I was folding my clothes, there was a knock on my door. "Lana," Ethan's voice called softly. "Can I come in?" I sighed, already irritated. "What do you want?" "Just open the door. I need to tell you something." When I opened it, he was standing there holding a small box. His eyes were unusually tender. "Lana," he said softly, "this is for you." Inside the box was a gold ring. "You've been my fiancé for so many years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I've never done anything for you. I went to the mall today just to pick this out. It's our engagement ring." Then, to my astonishment, Ethan actually knelt down on one knee. "Lana, will you marry me?" I stared at him, horrified. My body moved before my mind did. I stepped back and slammed the door right in his face. There was a muffled thud as the door hit his nose. His voice, choked and trembling, came from the other side. "Lana, I know you're not used to this. I'm sorry for everything. I ignored your feelings all these years. It's my fault, but I promise within 3 months I'll come back for you. I'll make it right." Then he added quickly, "I'm leaving tomorrow at noon. Let's go to the registry office at 8 to get our marriage license." I froze for a moment. In my previous life, none of this had ever happened. Ethan must have finally gotten scared, worried that his obedient little servant might not be so obedient anymore. So that's it, I thought coldly. He's just trying to secure his safety net before he leaves. I said nothing, just turned the lock on the door and went back to packing my suitcase. Ethan's proposal had backfired miserably. I hadn't accepted the ring, and slamming the door on him made the whole thing absurdly pathetic. Later that night, I lay on my bed while in the next room. Ethan tossed and turned, unable to sleep. His mind replayed our past over and over. It had been me, Lana Reed, who gave up everything for him, who built his life with my hands. He told himself that of all the people in the world, the one he owed most was me. He thought about how in the past, when he'd been humiliated and betrayed, I had stood by him. Now that he finally had recognition and success, he wanted to work hard, earn more money, and give me the good life I deserved. He convinced himself that I'd sold the breakfast shop because I was worried he wouldn't have enough to live on in the capital. He believed that I was saving the money, waiting for the right moment. Maybe when he was about to board the train, I would hand him the card with my savings just like before, because this wasn't the first time I'd done something like that. The first was when he got accepted into college. At the last moment, as if pulling a magic trick, I had handed him the money for his tuition and living expenses. The second time was when he'd lost everything. His job, his confidence, his pride. Without a word, I had taken out a $500,000 loan to build him a lab. Ethan lay there thinking, without Lana Reed, there would be no me. If only he knew. This time I was done saving him. Now that Ethan was certain I had no money, he convinced himself I must have secretly sold the shop again and set aside $500,000 for him, just like before. He thought I was still the same selfless, foolish woman, quietly sacrificing for him behind the scenes. In his heart, he told himself I was too good for him. Far too good. He swore he would never do anything to betray me again. He admitted that when he first met Sophia Lynn, he had been tempted. Her youth and beauty had shaken him, but it was my sincerity, my unwavering devotion that had brought him back to the right path. He told himself that once they reached the capital, he would help Sophia find a job and then distance himself from her. He would make things clear between them. He would never betray me. Not again. He promised himself that. Ethan tossed and turned the entire night, lost in his fantasies of repentance and self-redemption, until he finally fell asleep in the early morning hours. By the time his parents woke him up, the sun was already high in the sky, blinking against the bright light pouring through the window. He realized with a start that he'd overslept. Sophia was already up, dressed to perfection, her makeup flawless, and her outfit carefully chosen. When she saw him, she flashed her sweetest smile. "Ethan," she cooed, "what were you doing last night? How could you sleep in so late? I've been waiting for you to pick me up all morning, and you never came. I was so worried I came over myself. By the way, where's Lana? I haven't seen her. Did she give you the money?" Ethan froze, unsure which question to answer first. He glanced at the clock. It was already close to 10 o'clock. His train was at noon. He had promised to go with me to the registry office at 8 o'clock to get our marriage license, but he'd overslept. Why didn't Lana wake me up? Sophia's eyes drifted to the small velvet box in his hand. "What's this?" she asked curiously. "Oh wow, what a beautiful gold ring. Is it for me?" Before she could slip it onto her finger, Ethan snatched it back. They were all tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of people whose mere presence made others step back. One look at them, and you knew they weren't people to be trifled with. Mrs. Gray had tried to throw a tantrum at first, shrieking about injustice, but before she could finish, the buyer, built like a bull, grabbed her by the collar and tossed her out of the house like a rag doll. Within minutes, the Grays' belongings were hurled out onto the street, scattered like trash. Only then did fear finally set in. Mrs. Gray no longer dared to challenge them. She lay on the ground, sobbing and muttering curses through her tears. That wicked woman, Lana Reed, how could she do this to us? Selling the house without telling anyone? No warning, no discussion. Where are we supposed to live now? That heartless, venomous girl. She's trying to drive us to our deaths. Her shouting drew a crowd, and one of the neighbors, clearly disgusted, cut in sharply. "What do you mean without telling anyone? This house was Lana's parents' home, her inheritance. It belongs to her, not you. She has every right to sell it. What business is it of yours? How is it none of my business?" Mrs. Gray snapped back, her face twisting. "Lana is my son's fiancée. She's part of the Gray family. Her house is our house. She can't sell it without the Gray family's permission. If we don't agree, she has no right to sell it." That statement set the crowd ablaze. "What the hell are you saying?" One neighbor shot back. "Since when did Lana's property become yours? She let you freeload in that house for years. No rent, no bills, not even paying for food. That was charity, not ownership. And you dare claim it's yours." Another neighbor joined in, voice rising with anger. "Do you people even have a conscience? When your family fled here with nothing, it was Lana's parents who took you in. And this is how you repay them? By trying to steal their daughter's house." "Exactly," someone else shouted. "Her parents died because of your family's mess, and instead of being grateful, you've lived off their daughter all these years, treating her like a maid, making her cook, clean, and care for your sickly selves. Shame on you." The murmurs grew into open condemnation as more neighbors gathered around, glaring at the Grays. "Every time we saw that poor girl, she was running herself ragged at the shop, then coming home to do your laundry, cook your meals, and scrub your floors. And you always claiming to be too sick to lift a finger." The truth was out, and for once, no one in the Gray family could talk their way out of it. Their hypocrisy was laid bare for all to see. They did nothing all day, absolutely nothing. Always claiming they were too sick to work, but everyone in the neighborhood knew better. "Too sick?" One neighbor snapped. "More like too lazy. I've never seen a lazier couple in my life. If the oil bottle tipped over, they wouldn't even bother picking it up. Whenever I was too busy running the breakfast shop to cook at home, They would just sit there waiting for me. Sometimes even sending people to the shop to drag me back to make their meals. They had 2 perfectly good hands and legs, but refused to lift a finger. By now, the neighbors' scolding had turned vicious, and Mr. and Mrs. Gray were so humiliated they couldn't even raise their heads. Mrs. Gray's tears dried up. Her face burned with shame as she looked around helplessly, wanting to disappear. Then she spotted her son, Ethan, being dragged back through the crowd by a neighbor. Her expression shifted instantly. She'd found her lifeline. "Ethan," she screeched, rushing toward him. "What's going on? Why did Lana sell the house without saying a word? What does she think we are? Trash?" Before Ethan could answer, Sophia Lynn hurried forward too, clutching his arm with trembling hands. "Ethan," she cried. "They said Lana took the money and left. She went south. Is that true?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded slightly. Sophia let out a sharp, high-pitched gasp. "She left with all that money. The shop alone sold for $500,000 and the house for another $500,000. That's a full $1 million. She took all that money and didn't even tell you. How could she? What does she take you for?" Ethan couldn't answer. His head was spinning, still refusing to believe that I had truly left him and his parents behind. I had loved him so much, devoted 8 long years of my life to him. How could I just walk away? Even Sophia didn't want to believe it at first. She'd always seen me as the kind of woman who would never fight back, who would endure everything with a smile. Even when she provoked me, I never showed anger. Just that same quiet, foolish grin. She had thought I was harmless, too stupid to ever resist. But now I'd pulled the rug right out from under her feet. The realization left her furious. All that money she'd assumed would eventually fall into her lap was gone. The dream she built of an easy, comfortable life in the capital had evaporated overnight. "Damn her," Sophia cursed, losing all composure. She took the money and ran. How are we supposed to survive in the capital now? Ethan couldn't answer that either. His silence only fueled her rage. "That witch did this on purpose, didn't she?" Sophia yelled, her voice shrill. "She found out you weren't taking her to the capital, that you were taking me. So she planned all this to get back at us. She's been scheming from the start." The moment those words left her mouth, the entire crowd fell silent. The noisy, murmuring neighbors went quiet all at once, their gazes snapping toward her and toward Ethan, whose hand she was still gripping tightly. Sophia felt the weight of their stares, unease creeping up her spine. "What?" she said defensively. Then someone from the crowd spoke, their voice cutting through the tension. "So what you're saying is Ethan Gray was going to the capital without his fiancée Lana Reed, but was planning to take you instead?" Still caught up in her anger, Sophia blurted without thinking. "Of course, why would he take Lana? She's uneducated. She doesn't understand anything. What would she even do there?" A wet slapping sound interrupted her, followed by a loud spit. A wad of phlegm landed square on her cheek. "You shameless tramp!" an old woman shouted from the crowd. "I've never seen anyone so disgusting in my life." The crowd erupted. So that's what was going on? No wonder Lana looked so worn out lately. She must have known. And here we all thought she was finally getting her happy ending. Going to the capital to live a good life. Turns out that bastard Ethan was leaving her behind to take this little vixen instead. "I saw them myself." Another neighbor chimed in angrily. "He took her shopping, bought her dresses, jewelry, a gold bracelet. Meanwhile, poor Lana's been wearing the same faded clothes for years. He never bought her a single thing. Yeah, he's nothing but a heartless snake. Just like that homewrecker he's parading around, taking advantage of a girl with no parents, treating her like a servant for years." The crowd's outrage grew louder by the second. Their fury, long simmering after years of watching the Gray family leech off me, finally exploded. Everyone was talking at once, their voices overlapping in righteous anger. She cooked for them, cleaned for them, worked herself to death at the shop just to keep them fed. And this is how they repay her. The tide had turned. The entire neighborhood, who once pitted me quietly, now stood united, openly condemning Ethan and his family, their words as sharp as knives. The neighbors' outrage only grew fiercer once they realized that Ethan and his family had bullied me into leaving. "How could anyone with a conscience stomach this?" one woman shouted. Then, as if on cue, a dozen people spat at Ethan, Sophia, and the Grays. Shameless bastards, someone yelled. You used that poor girl for years, treated her like a servant, and when she wasn't useful anymore, you kicked her out. Are you even human? Exactly, another neighbor chimed in. I've always thought that little fox was suspicious. Dressed nice every day, eating good food, always hanging off Ethan's arm. Anyone would think they were husband and wife living under the same roof like that. Please, we all know what's been going on. Yeah, a man barked. They've been fooling around behind Lana's back for ages. No shame at all. I've never seen someone so eager to throw herself at another woman's man. University professor's daughter? My ass. Another spat. Is that what your parents taught you? How to become a mistress? Insults and curses filled the air. Sophia's face flushed red with humiliation as she burst into tears. But the crowd didn't let up. One of the older women from across the street grabbed a bucket of filthy water and flung it straight at her. Get out of here, you shameless thing. Take your whole rotten family and go. Ethan tried to speak to explain, but no one was listening anymore. The truth was the neighbors had never liked him. He'd always treated them with cold indifference, looking down on them as if they were beneath him. And people noticed things like that. The only reason they ever tolerated the Gray family was because of me. I'd been kind, polite, always willing to lend a hand. Out of respect for me, they turned a blind eye to the Grays' arrogance. But now that I was gone, they no longer felt the need to hold back. The Grays and Sophia were pelted with spit, wilted vegetables, rotten eggs, and even buckets of dirty water. Within minutes, they were drenched and reeking, humiliated beyond words. Mr. and Mrs. Gray, who had always strutted around with their noses in the air ever since their brilliant son got into a top university, were completely unprepared for such public scorn. They couldn't handle it. Their faces turned pale, their bodies trembling, furious, humiliated, and too weak to withstand the blow. Both of them collapsed at the same time. Ethan panicked instantly. Mom, Dad. He rushed to their side, his hands shaking. Somebody call an ambulance, please. Moments later, paramedics arrived and wheeled his parents into the emergency room. The doctor quickly came out demanding payment for the treatment. That was when Ethan realized, with a cold, sinking feeling, that he didn't have any money. And to make things worse, it was already past noon. His train ticket to the capital had expired. Everything that could possibly go wrong had come crashing down in a single day. And yet Sophia still stood there, her voice trembling but petulant. Ethan, what about us? Are we still going to the capital? How are we supposed to live without money? Her words snapped the last thread of patience inside him. This was all because of her. If Sophia hadn't shown up in his life, none of this would have happened. If she hadn't reappeared, he never would have felt obligated to repay her father's kindness. He never would have decided to bring her to the capital instead of Lana. If it hadn't been for Sophia, Lana wouldn't have gotten angry, wouldn't have left. He would have taken Lana and his parents to the capital together. She would have cooked, cleaned, and cared for them. And he would have worked hard, earned money, built a happy family. Everything would have been perfect. But now, because of this uninvited troublemaker, Lana was gone and his parents were lying in the hospital. Who was going to take care of them now? Certainly not Sophia, the pampered princess who couldn't even wash a dish. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became until the rage exploded out of him. This is all your fault, he roared, glaring at her. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. You're a curse. Nothing but bad luck. Sophia burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan, don't yell at me like that. I didn't mean. If it had been before, Ethan would have comforted her immediately, but now he couldn't even look at her. His mind was a storm of panic and despair. The doctor came out again, impatient. Sir, we need payment right now if you want to continue treatment. Ethan clenched his fists, his face pale. He had no money left, not a single cent, and it was his own fault. He had assumed that Lana had sold the house to help him, that just like before, she'd be his safety net, ready to step in whenever he needed her. He'd forgotten the lessons of hardship, grown careless and entitled. Just this week, Sophia had been sick with stomach trouble, and he'd spent the last of his cash buying her medicine and expensive supplements, playing the doting man, while never realizing he'd already burned through the very last of his lifeline. He had already spent a fortune. His parents weren't easy to deal with either. Ever since they'd learned that their son was whining and dining Sophia, taking her out to expensive restaurants and buying her treats, they had started demanding the same. Whenever Ethan bought Sophia something good to eat, his parents insisted on having it too. In just a few days, every last cent he had left was gone. Even the gold ring he'd used to propose to her had been paid for on his credit card. Now faced with the hospital's demand for payment, Ethan's heart pounded in panic. He had no choice but to pull out his credit card again and charge the medical fees. After hours of waiting, his parents were finally resuscitated. But the stroke had left them half paralyzed, their faces twisted, their speech slurred, and they'd lost control of their bowels. They needed constant round-the-clock care. In the past, that kind of thing would have been handled by him quietly and without complaint. But now all of it fell squarely on Ethan's shoulders. He had never dealt with anything like this before. The sight, the smell, it made him sick to his stomach. He forced himself to clean up after his parents, gagging with every breath, unable to eat for the rest of the day. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The doctor told him his parents' condition wasn't going to improve anytime soon. They would likely need to stay in the hospital long-term. He suggested Ethan prepare himself mentally and recommended hiring a professional caregiver. Another task that used to fall to him. Now it was all his burden. Ethan felt like his world was collapsing. He paced the hallway, sweating, his mind blank, feeling an almost suicidal kind of despair. Finally, his gaze fell on Sophia. "Sophia," he said, his voice trembling. "Can you help me take care of my parents for a while? I'll pay you. I promise." Her expression changed instantly, revulsion flashing in her eyes. Take care of those drooling, half-paralyzed old people? The thought made her skin crawl. She hadn't gotten close to Ethan to become a nursemaid to his parents. That kind of dirty, thankless work was something only a fool like Lana would ever agree to. Still, she couldn't outright refuse him, so she forced a stiff smile and nodded half-heartedly. "All right, I'll try." Ethan, desperate and exhausted, took her words as a promise. He finally felt a faint sense of relief. Now all that was left was to figure out where to get money. He thought for a long time, then his eyes landed on Sophia's jewelry. "Sophia," he said carefully, "I don't have any cash right now. Why don't we pawn the things I bought you before? Don't worry, I'll make it up to you later. Double." Sophia froze, a look of resentment flickering across her face, but in the end, she reluctantly took off the necklace and bracelets Ethan had given her. When they pawned them, the shop offered only a fraction of what he'd paid, a pitiful amount compared to the original prices. It wasn't nearly enough. His parents' condition wasn't something that could be resolved in a few days, and hospital bills mounted fast. Safia forced herself to change Mrs. Gay's soiled bed sheets once, but the stench and filth nearly made her vomit. She couldn't take it. If she kept doing this, she thought bitterly, it would kill her. Desperate to escape, she suddenly came up with an idea. "Ethan," she said softly, "why don't you talk to your company? Tell them about what's happening. Maybe they'll let you take an advance on your salary." Her suggestion made Ethan's eyes light up. Of course, the company, the product he had developed, had just been approved for mass production, and once it hit the market it would bring in huge profits. Surely they would help him now. He immediately contacted the company. After a few hours of back and forth, they gave him an answer. They were willing to advance him some funds to help him through his current difficulties. The news made Ethan's knees weak with relief. Money solved everything. With financial backing, he could hire proper caregivers for his parents and finally stop dealing with the mess himself. But the company had its conditions. The advance would be granted on the agreement that Ethan return to headquarters as soon as possible to complete his project. They promised him a safety net, an advance of 10 million yuan. And once the product successfully launched, he would receive a generous bonus. Ethan's heart soared. With that kind of money, everything would be fine again. He could take his parents to the capital with him, hire Sophia to help care for them, and focus on his work. He even began to fantasize about his future. How he would become rich, powerful, respected, how Lana would one day regret ever leaving him. He'd marry Sophia, he thought, and give her the best of everything. Just imagining that perfect, effortless future filled him with satisfaction. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, Ethan finally felt at peace. He hadn't had a full night's sleep in days. But now, with the crisis seemingly solved, he could finally rest. He hired a nurse to take over his parents' care and checked into a hotel with Sophia. Both of them were exhausted, and as soon as they hit the soft mattress, Ethan drifted into a deep, heavy sleep. He slept soundly, so soundly that it wasn't until his bladder ached from pressure that he finally woke up. Ethan woke in the middle of the night with a full bladder. Still half asleep, he rubbed his eyes, stretched, and got out of bed. As he made his way toward the bathroom, his knee banged hard against the edge of the table. "Damn it!" he hissed through his teeth, pain shooting up his leg. He forced himself to finish his business, only to notice a dark bruise already forming. The ache throbbed so badly that he couldn't fall back asleep. Deciding to go find a pharmacy for some ointment, he limped out of the room, one hand pressed to his sore leg. As he passed by the door of the room where Safia was staying, he noticed something strange. The door wasn't fully closed. It was cracked open just slightly. At this hour of the night, his stomach tightened. A flicker of worry crept up his spine. Maybe something had happened to her. Ignoring the pain, Ethan hurried over and gently pushed the door open. "Sophia!" He started to call her name, but the words froze on his tongue. From inside came the unmistakable sounds of low, breathing moans and a man's voice. "Baby, I've missed you so much." The sudden intimate tone made Ethan's heart jolt violently. His first thought was that an intruder had broken in. Someone was attacking Sophia. He was just about to rush in until he heard her voice. "I missed you too," she panted softly. "If it weren't for that damn Ethan Gray, we wouldn't have been apart for so long." Her tone was filled with disgust, sharp, cold, dripping with contempt. It wasn't the sweet, gentle way she usually spoke to him. She sounded like a completely different person. Ethan froze in place. Inside the room, the two continued, unaware of his presence. Between gasps and murmurs, the man spoke in a mocking, amused voice. "Being with that bumpkin must be torture for you," he said. "Aside from his face, the guy is basically an idiot." Safia laughed faintly. "You don't know the half of it. His accent alone makes me sick. Every day I have to listen to that country hick. It's humiliating. If it weren't for our plan, I'd have dumped him long ago." "Just hang in there a little longer, baby," the man said. "Once Ethan's project hits the market and he makes real money, that's when we move." "I was planning to wait too," she said bitterly. "Take advantage of that fool's obsession with me until his research starts paying off, but I can't stand it anymore." Her voice turned harsh, full of disgust. "You didn't see it, did you? His parents, those two old cripples lying there drooling and pissing themselves. It's disgusting, and he actually thinks I'll take care of them like that idiot Lana Reed did. Who does he think I am? Every minute in that house makes me sick to my stomach." She took a deep breath and sneered. "We need to move sooner." "Move sooner," the man echoed. "But we haven't gotten the money yet." "The money's right there," Sophia snapped. "Ethan just got $10 million from his company. All we have to do is take it from him." $10 million's not enough," the man said thoughtfully. "That won't even buy a good apartment. Once his invention launches, he'll be making hundreds of millions. We have to be patient, baby. We can't throw away a cash cow like him." He kissed her, smirking. "Be a good girl. Just a few more days. Do it for your husband, okay?" Sophia groaned in frustration. "I can't. I really can't. Every time I see those two old freaks I want to puke. And now Ethan's been yelling at me too. He doesn't even try to sweet-talk me anymore. Who does he think he is? Some big shot. He must think I'm that idiot Lana. Ready to serve and sacrifice forever. I can't take another minute of it." The man chuckled lowly. "Relax, baby. For the sake of our future, let me handle it. Those two old bastards, why not just help them along a little? They're already half dead. A few drops of something extra and poof, they're gone. You won't have to deal with them again." Sophia hesitated, then asked quietly, "And Ethan, for him?" The man's tone turned darker. "Slip him something too. Then you strip down and lie beside him. Make it look like he attacked you. We turn it into a scandal. After that, he'll be completely under our control. A man who's afraid of prison won't ever dare raise his voice to you again." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. The chill that crept through him was bone deep. "What? What kind of monster was she? His mind reeled. The woman he'd loved, protected, sacrificed everything for, was plotting to kill his parents and destroy him. Inside, Sophia laughed coldly. Ethan Gray, what a pathetic frog in a well. You should see him fawning over me, buying me clothes and gold jewelry like I'm some goddess. He makes me sick. He actually thinks I worship him. She snorted. That ungrateful fool really believes he's something special. Ethan stood outside the door, trembling, his world collapsing in silence. While the two of them continued mocking him, completely oblivious that the man they were scheming to ruin was standing just a few feet away, listening to every word. Ethan's whole body trembled with rage as he listened from the doorway. For so long, he had truly believed that Sophia Lynn saw something special in him, that she admired his intelligence and talent, that she respected him the way Lana once had. He thought her gentle smiles and kind words came from admiration, even love. But now he finally saw it for what it was. Sophia had never respected him. She despised him. She'd looked down on his humble background, mocked his lack of sophistication, sneered at his obsession with research. Every moment they'd spent together, what he had thought were tender, loving memories, had been nothing more than an act. To her, being with him had been torture. He'd been nothing but her pawn. Ethan's entire body shook with fury. His vision blurred red, and his breath came out in harsh bursts. The humiliation burned so deep it felt like it might eat him alive. You filthy, disgusting traitors! He roared, slamming the door open. His voice was ragged with hatred. You two are monsters. That was the night everything began to unravel. When I, Lana, left with the $100,000 I'd earned, I headed south. I rested for 2 days, then immediately began looking for a new place to start over. My decision to move south wasn't some impulsive whim. I had thought about it long and hard after returning home. In my past life, I had run that little breakfast shop for 30 long years, never once daring to change. I had trapped myself there for Ethan, for his family, until my own life had shrunk into a cage. I used to dream about what life might be like elsewhere. I'd listen to neighbors talk about the bustling southern cities, their prosperity, the opportunities, and they'd tell me my cooking skills could make a fortune down there. I didn't know if I could really succeed, but I wanted to give myself that chance. I found a location, began renovations, and hired workers. The restaurant wasn't even open yet when the police called. They told me Ethan was in trouble. They needed me to come back immediately for questioning. Confused and uneasy, I returned to my hometown and walked straight into a nightmare. At the detention center, I saw Ethan sitting there in handcuffs and leg irons. He looked nothing like the man I remembered. Gone was the proud, confident scholar. In his place sat a hollow shell, his hair disheveled, his face gaunt, his eyes vacant. He didn't even look alive. The police told me he'd been arrested for murder. He had killed a man named Victor Shao and stabbed a woman named Sophia Lynn so brutally she was barely alive. They said Ethan hadn't spoken a single word during the interrogation. His only request was to see me. He'd refused to explain anything until he did. They hoped I could convince him to talk to help them understand what had driven him to do something so horrific. I couldn't believe it. How could Ethan, the man who once doted on Sophia, turn on her like that? They said Sophia had been 4 weeks pregnant when he attacked her. He'd cut her open, torn out her womb, and destroyed the baby inside her. The words made my blood run cold. I shivered involuntarily, my stomach twisting in horror. The police said the brutality of the crime was unlike anything they'd seen. They had to understand why he did it. And truthfully, I wanted to know too. How could Ethan Gray, the man who had once looked at Sophia with such devotion, commit such an unspeakable act? When I entered the room, he sat motionless, staring blankly ahead. But at the sound of the door opening, his eyes flicked up, and when he saw me, his lips quivered. "Lana, you came," he murmured. I sat across from him, silent. He forced a faint smile. It was a ghastly, broken expression. "You must hate me." Hate? Of course I did. After everything he'd done, how could I not? Ethan gave a hollow laugh, his eyes filling with self-loathing. "I hate myself too for not cherishing you, for being blind enough to fall for someone as poisonous as her." His voice cracked. "You were good to me, better than I ever deserved. I ruined everything. I deserve this. I deserve to die." His words came out in fits and starts, half coherent, as he began recounting everything that had happened. He said that when he first arrived at the university with nothing but a worn suitcase, everyone mocked him. Everyone except Sophia. She treated him like a real person. Her parents were kind to him too. They pitied his poor background, welcomed him into their home. For the first time he said he'd felt warmth. He worked with Sophia's father in the lab, eager to prove himself, desperate to repay their kindness. He wanted to show he was worthy. He succeeded. He graduated with honors and stayed in the capital to continue research under Professor Lin. But then everything went wrong. Sophia's father was accused of corruption and arrested. Ethan believed he'd been framed, that he was innocent, and he stood by the family's side. He convinced himself that the world had been unfair to them, that he had a duty to help the Lins reclaim their reputation. If I hadn't left him back then, if he hadn't accidentally stumbled upon Sophia's secret, he might never have known the truth. He would have gone on believing in her lies forever. Ethan told me everything. He said he had caught Sophia Lin and Victor Xiao in bed together. The sight had driven him insane. He'd lost control and lunged at them in a blind fury, shouting, swinging, wanting to tear them apart. But Ethan had never been the kind of man who could fight. Within moments, Victor overpowered him. He was beaten savagely, fists and boots raining down until blood poured from his nose and mouth. When he came to, everything had changed. The gentle, soft-spoken Sophia, the woman who had always acted fragile and pure in front of him, was gone. In her place stood someone cold, sharp, and venomous. She didn't bother to hide anymore. As Ethan blinked through the dizziness, he saw her sitting on the couch, one leg crossed over the other, cigarette dangling from her lips. Her face was calm, almost amused. "Let's make a deal," she said coolly. She told him exactly what she wanted. His research, every bit of it. She and Victor planned to use his life's work to make themselves rich. And if he didn't cooperate, they would destroy him. They'd already prepared everything. They had stripped him, staged photographs of him and Sophia in bed together, and taken pictures that made it look like he had forced himself on her. "If you don't agree," Sophia warned, smirking, "I'll tell the police you raped me." Ethan was stunned, speechless. Then Sophia laughed, a cruel mocking sound. "Did you really think a man like you could ever be with me? A toad dreaming of eating swan meat. You actually thought I'd love you." Then she told him something that shattered whatever was left of his faith in her. Her father's arrest years ago hadn't been a mistake. He was guilty. The evidence had been solid. The crime's real. The whole Lin family had played the part of victims, pretending to be good, sympathetic people to earn Ethan's trust. They had used his loyalty, used him to serve their own ends. He had believed in them so completely. Even after her father went to prison, he had grieved for them, pitied them, and worked tirelessly in their name. But now, hearing the truth from Sophia's own mouth, his world collapsed. The people he had admired, respected, even idolized had been con artists from the very beginning. Her father's downfall had been deserved. He wasn't a misunderstood genius. He was a criminal. And Sophia, she was her father's daughter, just as deceitful, just as vile. After her parents were imprisoned, Sophia had gone abroad, hiding for a few years. When she returned to the country, she found out that Ethan was still stubbornly pursuing his research. She saw her chance. She knew his personality, his genius in science, his lack of street smarts. A man easy to deceive, eager to please. So she and Victor hatched a plan. She would approach Ethan under the guise of gratitude and admiration, the perfect mix of damsel in distress and loyal admirer. She'd appeal to his vanity, to his need to feel appreciated, and Ethan fell for it completely. He'd chosen to believe in the illusion she built, blind to everything else. Now looking back, he could see how foolish he had been. He told me how much he hated her then, how much he hated himself. He said that when he saw Sophia's true face, it was like waking from a dream into a nightmare. He didn't want to be her pawn anymore. He tried to resist, to break free, but she had already trapped him. She had the fake photos, the evidence of assault, and she wasn't afraid to use them. When he refused to surrender his research, Victor beat him again, harder this time, until he lost consciousness. And when he woke up, he remembered everything. He told me that somehow, the moment he regained consciousness, he regained the memories of his past life, our past life. He remembered everything he had done. How he'd gone to the capital with Sophia, how one night after too many drinks he'd slept with her, and how she'd later told him she was pregnant. He said he'd felt guilty toward me, but at the same time, he couldn't give up the comfort and sweetness Sophia offered him. So he stayed with her. He married her. They had children. And all the while he hid it from me. He said he'd been terrified to tell me the truth. So he lied. Year after year, he lived in fear and shame until the day I died. After my death, he discovered the full extent of Sophia's deceit. For years she had been asking him for money on my behalf, claiming she wanted to repay me for taking care of his parents. Ethan, racked with guilt, had sent it willingly, but I never received a single cent. She had kept it all for herself. Sophia controlled everything. His work, his finances, his life. She had even hidden the news of his parents' deaths from him. If I hadn't found my way to the capital, if I hadn't insisted on confronting him face to face, if Sophia hadn't ordered someone to run me down with a car that night, if not for that investigation, the police might never have uncovered what Sophia Lynn had done. He said he had never known the truth until the very end. After the police arrested Sophia Lynn, everything finally came to light. Ethan, who had been kept in the dark for years, at last saw her for who she truly was. Both Sophia and her partner Victor Xiao were taken into custody. During the interrogation they confessed everything. The so-called children that Sophia had claimed were Ethan's, the ones she had used to keep him trapped in guilt and obligation, had nothing to do with him at all. Both of those children were hers and Victor Xiao's. For years, Ethan had been wearing a crown of betrayal without even knowing it. The humiliation broke him. He said he couldn't look anyone in the eye again. After regaining his memories of his previous life, Ethan realized that Sophia and Victor were planning to manipulate him all over again, just like before. Rage consumed him. He said he bought a knife, pretended to submit to them, and waited for his chance. When they least expected it, he struck. Victor was first one clean lethal stab. But with Sophia he didn't let it end so quickly. She was the one who had destroyed everything twice, the one who had ruined me, deceived him, and mocked his love. Ethan said he couldn't give her an easy death. He wanted her to feel the pain she'd caused, to make her suffer the way she had made others suffer. He said he cut open her abdomen, tore out the womb that once carried the child she had used to trap him in their past life, and severed her arms and legs one by one. I wanted to kill her, he told me, his voice trembling. But then I thought, death would be too kind. I wanted her to live, to spend the rest of her life trapped between being human and being a monster. That's what she owed us. That's what she deserved. That was his motive. After saying this, Ethan broke down completely. He sobbed, begged for forgiveness, pleaded for me to understand. But how could I forgive him? Whether he lived or died, it no longer had anything to do with me. In my past life, I had been blind and foolish, wasting years of devotion on a man who didn't deserve an ounce of it. In this life I had finally awakened, and I wasn't about to let his tragedy or guilt chain me anymore. Ethan Gray would be sentenced to death. That much was certain. His end was sealed. But me, I was still young. My life was just beginning. I had time, so much time to rebuild, to live, to thrive. When I walked out of the police station, the sunlight hit my face. The sky above was bright, endless blue. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from my chest. Come on, Lana, I whispered to myself. From today on, live for yourself slowly, patiently, beautifully. You'll make it. You'll succeed. This time you'll live your life whole.